Hi, welcome to class. My name is Professor Don LaFond. This week in Cisco 2, we are covering two modules. We are covering Module 12, Wireless LAN Concepts, and then I'll end this recording and I'll create another recording for Module 13, which is Wireless LAN Configuration. Let me go ahead and share my screen. If you have any questions, and you're here with me live, please hold those questions until the end of the presentation. At the end of the presentation, I'll allow for a period of time where you can ask your questions. If you are watching this as a recording, please ask your questions inside of NetAcad, if you're in my NetAcad class, or down below in the comment sections of YouTube, and I'll do my best to answer those questions, although I do encourage you to answer each other's questions. Also open up the chat room just in case there's any issues. All right. And minimize, almost there, guys. Just making it look right on my side. All right. Module 12, Wireless LAN. Tonight, I'm going to explain how wireless LANs enable network connectivity. We'll describe wireless LAN technology and standards, describe the components of wireless LAN infrastructure. We'll explain how wireless technology enables wireless LAN operation. We'll explain how a WLC uses Catwack to manage multiple APs. We'll describe channel management in a wireless LAN. We'll describe threats to wireless LANs, and we'll describe wireless LAN security mechanisms. So an introduction to wireless, as if you really need an introduction to wireless, since all of us have been using wireless every day of our life for probably the last 5 to 10 years. So a wireless LAN is a type of wireless network that is commonly used in homes, offices, and wireless environments, campus environments. Wireless LANs make mobility possible within the home or business environments. Of course, you can take your laptop or your tablet anywhere in your home and still access the internet. Wireless infrastructure adapts to rapidly changing needs and technologies. Now, there are four different wireless LANs that they just briefly touch on here. There's the wireless personal area network, low power, short range, 6 to 9 meters, based on IEEE 802.15 standard and the 2.4 gigahertz frequency. Bluetooth and Zigbee are wireless LANs. One moment, please. All right. So Bluetooth, for example, when I leave my home and I walk over to my car and I get in my car, I was listening to music in the house, my car picks up right where I was. I love it, and the song continues. Wireless LAN, medium-sized networks up to 300 feet based on IEEE 802.11 standards, the 2.4 or 5 gigahertz. That would be your standard G networks or AC, or some of you, nobody's using A or B anymore, but somebody might be using an N network still. I think AX is the newest standard. Anyways, that is your standard wireless network. Then there's a wireless MAN. That's a larger geographical area, such as a city or a district. It uses specific licensed frequencies. And then a wireless WAN is an extensive geographical area for national or global communication. It uses specific license frequencies as well. I think I just read recently where there's a couple satellite networks that are competing to provide wireless network to global areas, like all of North America or all of Africa, for example, in an attempt to reach areas where currently wireless doesn't reach. The standard wireless that we have doesn't reach. So that's where that would be used. And then I just covered these. Let's see if I missed anything. Oh, there's Bluetooth. I already covered that. Oh, there's a new Bluetooth. It is low energy and it supports a mesh topology to large scale network devices. And it allows for more Bluetooth enabled devices because they don't need the strong signal. Uh, Bluetooth basic rate, enhanced rate, BR, EDR supports point-to-point topologies and is optimized for audio streaming. We also have WiMAX, worldwide interoperability for microwave access, alternative broadcast wired internet connections. I believe here in the town I live in, we had Clearwire for a little while. That just didn't work, mainly because it has to be point to point. We live in a flat area, so here in my town, that just didn't take off very well. We have cellular broadband, carries your cell phone data, voice and data. There's a couple standards, GSM and CDMA, and we use CDMA here in the United States. Satellite broadcast uses directional satellite dish aligned with the satellite in geographical orbit. It needs a clear line of sight. You might have internet or TV services through DirecTV, for example. That would be satellite broadband, and it's wireless. There's no connection to the satellite. There's a list here of all of the different standards. You'll want to review these standards. Yeah, I think I hit all of these. I don't know if I mentioned G, but you'll want to be familiar with these standards. I'm not sure how many questions you're going to get on the exam that asks you the range of a specific device. But anyways, here we are in today's age is up here at the top. All wireless devices operate in a range of the electromagnetic spectrum. Wireless LAN networks operate in the 2.5 and 5 gigahertz frequency bands. And it shows you that spectrum and other devices. Sometimes we talk about interference with things like microwave because that also operates in that spectrum. Standards and now wireless standards organizations create standards which ensure why do I struggle with some of these words? Interoperability between devices that are made by different manufacturers. Internationally, the three organizations that influence wireless LAN standards include the International Telecommunications Union, ITU, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, the IEEE, and the Wi-Fi Alliance. And you'll want to, of course, make sure you're familiar with all of the different organizations and what they do before you take a small assessment here in the course of the big CCNA exam at the end, which is the goal of all of us. Wireless LAN components. There is a video here that will talk about antennas, wireless routers, internet access points, wireless access points. Let me bring that video over to our classroom and start it.
Hello everyone, it's time to get our computer hooked up to a network. In this video, we're going to do a wired and wireless configuration using our Cisco wireless router. To start, we will connect our computer's Ethernet port using a network cable to one of our LAN ports on the back. Take my computer's Ethernet cable, plug it into one of our LAN ports. Next, we want to get this wireless router connected to the internet. So I'll take my internet cable from my modem and plug that into my WAN port on the back. At this time, I can go to my computer's web browser and I can type in the IP address of my Cisco wireless router. If you do not know the default IP address of your wireless router, you can look it up in the documentation that came with it, or you can use some command line tools on your user device. My wireless router has the default IP address of 192.168.1.1. I'll type it in and I'll click enter. Immediately, my wireless router asks for credentials. I will use the credentials I found in my documentation, which was a username of Cisco and a password of Cisco. Consult your documentation to find your credentials. I'll click on login. Immediately now, I can't do any configuration changes except to change the default password. The old password was Cisco, as we mentioned. I can see that there's some minimum requirements I need to follow, as well as a password strength meter down below. The password strength meter is not foolproof, but it does help you in determining password complexity. For the new password, I can type in something a little more complex than before, and I can get a password strength supposedly strong. But again, how much do you trust these meters? They help though. With the new password selected, I'll click Save. And I know it's going to work because it's going to log me out of my wireless router and require me to log back in with my new credentials. I'll use the username of Cisco and then my new password. And then I can click Login. And now we can actually configure our firewall router settings. To get started, we're going to take a look at the WAN settings. That's going to be inside of our networking section. And by default, we're in WAN. We can see that the internet connection type is using DHCP for our internet addressing. Also, for our DNS addressing, we have that set to automatically get that as well from our ISP, our internet service provider. If we wanted to change this to utilize a static address, we could do so. If we wanted to change our DNS servers that we're utilizing to not be from our ISP, but maybe from Cisco's OpenDNS or other servers, we could also select that here as well. Besides our WAN settings, we can go over to the LAN settings, and in our local area network settings, we can see a lot of items that we can configure. To start off here, what we can see is the local address of our wireless router. This is the default address provided by the manufacturer of my router. If I'd like to, I can put in a new value here and then click Save. Besides just changing the IP address on my wireless router itself, we can change the subnet mask, which controls the network size. Also, we have DHCP server settings. By default, my wireless router is acting as my DHCP server. Down below the DHCP server settings, we can see the starting address that we're giving out to the user devices, as well as how many user devices we're supporting with DHCP. The default on my router here is 50 devices. If I'd like to have more devices on my local area network, I can increase this number from 50 to a higher value, for example, maybe 100. As we continue on looking at our settings, what we'd like to take a look at here is, what if I didn't need the DHCP server on this router? What if I had a separate server running on my network? I could use my disable radial button to actually turn off DHCP on this device. When we talk about DNS settings, right now we're getting our DNS utilizing our WAN port and receiving it from our ISP. If I wanted to change what DNS server my users on my network are using, I can use the drop-down menu here for DNS, and I can have it used as below, where I get to specify multiple DNS servers for my user devices to target. So this has been great and awesome so far. What we want to do now is take a look at our wireless settings. I'm going to go ahead and click on wireless on the left side. I'm not going to save my changes. And our wireless screen loads up. Now inside the wireless settings, one of the first things we'll take a look at is this enable checkbox. This says our wireless transmitter is turned on and wireless is running on this device. If you wanted to disable wireless on your device, you can uncheck that radial button, and it effectively makes our wireless router firewall just a router firewall. This will disable the wireless transmitter. This will come in handy if you want this to act as a router, then you have other devices on your network that are acting as wireless access points to provide wireless coverage for your enterprise network. For us, we want to keep the wireless on so we can continue with this video. Next, in the wireless network mode drop-down box, we can select which wireless to support. If we leave the default of BGN mixed, it's going to be a slower wireless network than going with GN mixed, or G only or N only. For myself, I like to do GN mixed. I'm not going to provide legacy support for wireless B. Below that, we need to take a look at the wireless channel. We can leave this at the default of automatic, where the wireless router will determine automatically the best wireless frequency to utilize to avoid interference. If you wanted to statically set your radio frequency to use, we could do that here as well, but we'll leave it at auto. Down below, I have multiple wireless networks. I can deploy these on the wireless router all at the same time. By using the variety of edit buttons down below, I can change the wireless SSID, I can change the wireless password, I can even change the type of security for our wireless, as well as the maximum amount of wireless clients per wireless network I'm deploying. For example, if I click on the checkbox for the first wireless network of Cisco SB1, I can then click on the edit button down below. Immediately, I can change the wireless network name. Right now it's Cisco SB1. I can change this to Business Connect. Do I want the wireless name of Business Connect to be seen and visible by everybody? I can control that with the SSID broadcast button. Also on the far right, we can even control the maximum amount of clients allowed to connect, which I can change this to, for example, 40. When I'm done with these settings, I will click Save, and my wireless router is going to change Cisco SB1 to now be the name of Business Connect. Also, I'll be allowed to have 40 wireless users connected at a time. Next, if I select the checkbox for that wireless network again, and then I'll click on Edit Security Mode, it'll take me to a new screen. And in Security Mode, I can see my wireless name that I've configured, followed by the Security Mode dropdown. Right now, by default, we have WPA2 Personal. This uses the encryption of AES. This is more secure than choosing something like WPA2 Personal Mixed, which utilizes AES encryption and the legacy TKIP for backward compatibility. For us, we want the security mode of WPA2 Personal with AES encryption, which is more secure, and we will set up our password here. For example, how about this? Awesome. If you want to see what it looks like, that's my password. Now I'll click Save, and this will create the wireless password that my users will need to type in order to access the wireless name of Business Connect. With the wireless network named and our wireless password created, I go to my computer's wireless settings, and I can see Business Connect is ready to be connected to. I can click on that, click Connect, I can put in that password, and once I hit Next, we should get a wireless network connection, and we are good to go. We are seen as connected. We are accessing the radio frequency being sent off by my wireless transmitter on this wireless router. Now that we've completed this wired and wireless config walkthrough video, make sure you take the time to explore your own wireless router and try your hand at deploying the computer now. Thanks for watching.
All right, that was informative.
Hello, everyone.
And let's keep going. So some of the equipment that we will use, remember each device on the internet needs a unique NIC, network interface card or connection. In this case, we have that includes wireless, and it includes laptops and tablets, maybe a cell phone you have connected to the internet. You have used wireless NICs before on every device you've ever connected to the internet. Home user typically interconnects a wireless device using a small wireless router. The wireless routers served as the following: the access point, the switch, and the router. Now it's a switch because often you will have one device physically connected to it, say a desktop computer, and it is an access point because you'll have other devices such as tablets and laptops connected to it wirelessly. And of course, the router itself is your edge router, your default router before it goes out to the internet and connects to your ISP. Wireless clients use their wireless NICs to discover nearby access points. Clients then attempt to associate and authenticate with the access point. After being authenticated, wireless users have the access to the network resources. In today's world, they are trying to expand and allow sharing of networks. Comcast has been doing that for a little while, where it allows you to share your Comcast connection to people driving by on the street. It does allow for security concerns. I know my devices here, my Alexa, she just asked me if I wanted to enable something called, I think it's Street Talk or Street Walk. I think it's Street Walk, where ultimately she will share her network, Sidewalk. That's right, Sidewalk. Thank you.
Don't know that one.
Sidewalk, to be able to share my access wireless with people that may need it in my area. APs can be categorized as either autonomous APs or controller-based APs. APs are access points. Autonomous access points are standalone devices configured through a command line interface or GUI. Each autonomous access point acts independently of the others and is configured and managed manually by an administrator right there, one-on-one with that device. Controller-based APs, also known as lightweight APs, LAPs, use lightweight access point protocol, LWAPP, to communicate with the lightweight wireless app. AP. Why is there two P's there? To communicate with the wireless LAN controller. Wireless LAN controller, WLC, we'll see that again in a few minutes. Each lightweight access point is automatically configured and managed by the wireless LAN controller. Now, we are going to configure a WLC here in a few minutes, so I won't go too deep into that. But ultimately allowing you to communicate with multiple devices remotely and configure multiple wireless access points remotely. Types of external antennas include omnidirectional, which provides 360-degree coverage, ideal for houses, homes, and offices. Directional, focused radar signal in a specific direction. Examples are the Yagi and parabolic dish. Multiple input, multiple output antennas, MIMO, use multiple antennas up to 8 to increase the bandwidth. Wireless LAN operation. And I have a video to get us started on this topic. It's 12.3.1. Let me get that pulled up here.
Hello, everyone. Let's jump into wireless LAN operations. This is wireless local area network operation. And to get started, we need to talk about two different types of modes. So we're going to hit infrastructure mode, and then we're going to hit ad hoc mode. First, with the infrastructure mode, we're focusing here on a wireless network that's connected to wireless devices. But that wireless network connected to those wireless network devices is hooked to a wired distribution system. What that means is our wireless router is connected with a wired Ethernet cable down into our infrastructure. That infrastructure of these other two switches here will then carry that traffic on to the router and to the local PCs. You're literally connecting your wireless router with a wireless device and that wireless routers and having a wired connection to your distribution system. Let's switch over to ad hoc mode, much more basic. And with ad hoc mode, we're talking peer-to-peer. We've got two devices connecting wirelessly without any network infrastructure, without any wired distribution system. A good example of this would be having two phones and literally having two phones directly connected to each other, maybe sharing a file using technologies with Bluetooth or AirDrop, 802.11 coming into play there. But that would be ad hoc. You do not have an infrastructure device. It is directly device to device, known as peer-to-peer. Lastly, you could toss this in as like a extra mode, but this would be tethering. And with tethering, this is where you have a cell phone or a tablet with cellular data access connecting to cellular internet. But that cellular device is also running as an access point. We would call it as a hotspot. So while the cellular device itself is having a connection to the internet, it is also creating a wireless signal for wireless PCs, wireless tablets, and other devices to connect to the phone or tablet that's running cellular as a wireless router. From there are devices that do not normally have cellular data access. They can connect through that cellular data device, and that's called tethering. It really is similar to ad hoc, where we're going to be using a peer-to-peer from our, let's say, laptop or from a non-cellular data device with this cellular device, and then that cellular device itself will connect out to the cellular data network. So it's time to switch it up a little bit. We're going to get a couple new terms here like BSS and ESS. So let's dive right in. BSS is basic service set. And basic service set is where we talk about providing wireless access to small deployments. A basic service set will include a BSA, known as a basic service area. These yellow bubbles, for example, are basic service areas. That is the extent of the wireless signal that is possible to connect to with that access point that we see here. The BSS ID is the basic service set identifier, and that's going to be the layer 2 MAC address of your access point you're connecting to. So here's one access point, and that's the BSS ID, which is what you'd be connecting to inside of your basic service area with a laptop in that signal range. Here's another signal range, or a BSA, basic service area. There's a separate access point, and that access point has its BSS ID. That's the formal way that we recognize the access point, which again is the layer 2 MAC address of that access point. Now the thing is, this doesn't scale. And if you're talking about larger networks and scalability, we're going to flip over here to the ESS. With the ESS, which is the extended service set, we're going to have one huge large area of coverage. And that large area of coverage that we're going to be seeing here is going to be based off of having multiple BSAs, or basic service areas, deployed. But they're deployed in such a manner that they're all connected to one single wired distribution system. So we have multiple access points, each access point having its BSS ID, with devices connecting to those access points, and those access points being connected to that wired distribution system. And the cool thing about this is it promotes roaming, which means this user over here on the far left side in this BSA can take their laptop and walk over into another office and hook to another access point on the same wired distribution system. And with roaming, it would be seamless for that user. They don't have to disconnect from one wireless SSID and connect to another one. It will be seamless. So let's continue on through our conversation as we connect to these access points. What do we have to worry about? Well, you shouldn't have to worry about this, but at least it's something to learn. And that's called 802.11 frame structure. We're not going to rip it apart, but we can talk about it. This 802.11 frame is similar to what we've seen in 802.3 Ethernet and Net frame, but we've got more fields. We've got here frame control, duration, multiple addresses, sequence control, and then even an address for it. What it comes down to is we have to concern ourselves with how our devices are going to be connecting to an access point or a wireless router, and that might be the middleman in our conversation to eventually have this traffic reach a web server on the internet like Cisco.com. So we have this middle device to work through. Well, how do we do that? Well, with these different fields inside of this frame structure, we can use things like address 1, where address 1, for example, would be the MAC address of the receiving wireless access point. Address 2, for example, would be the MAC address of the transmitting wireless device, like your cell phone or a tablet or the laptop you're on. Address 3 might even be the gateway device. This might be the router that's going to be the default gateway of the network. Think of all the different devices that your wireless client will have to get through to eventually leave its local area network when you're referring to having wireless and this wireless technology in the middle. We have control sequencing and fragmented frames coming up in the sequence control. Address 4 could be used in our ad hoc modes. In frame control, we have to worry about power management and subfields for different protocol versions and frame types. And finally, don't forget this big, huge area of payload. Payload is the data of your transmission. And then SCS for our frame check sequence, that's your error control. So all this comes into play to help us connect out with our wireless end devices. And speaking of wireless end devices, feels like there's a constant battle because everything is going wireless and it all wants to fight for bandwidth. But how do we gain access with many wireless devices to a single wireless access point? Well, there's a technology that's going to help us out, and that's called CSMA-CA. CSMA-CA is Carrier Sense Multiple Access Collision Avoidance. And really what this means is we're not going to allow traffic just be gliding into each other, flying through the air as all these different laptops and smart devices are trying to interconnect across an access point. We have a better way to go about it. With Carrier Sense Multiple Access Collision Avoidance, if you slow that down and speak it a couple times, that's really what's about to happen. What do I mean by that? Carrier Sense. We're going to listen to the wireless media. Multiple access. We have many devices that want to use the same media at the same time. Collision avoidance. We're going to make sure they don't all ram signals into each other and then corrupt that signal. So what does it mean in the most basic sense? We're going to have our wireless devices listen to the wireless channel and see if it's idle. See if there's no other traffic currently on that wireless channel. That channel is just called the carrier. We're then going to have the RTS. Your end device, your computer, your PC, the laptop, the tablet, it's going to send a RTS. And this is a ready to send message. That message will be heard by the access point. And the access point can then provide dedicated access to the network. Well, how does the end device know that the access point is ready? The access point will respond to that RTS, the ready to send. It'll respond to it with a clear to send, a CTS. It says, the dedicated access is ready for you. Go ahead and send. When the wireless end device hears that, it's going to then send and transmit its data. And by the way, all of our wireless transmissions are going to be acknowledged. And if the wireless end device does not receive an acknowledgement back, then it knows there was a collision. It's going to restart that entire process back from listen. In order for us to first communicate with a wireless network, though, we do have to associate with a wireless access point or wireless router. And all associating means is we need to agree on specific parameters being used by these wireless network devices, as in the wireless access points or wireless routers. So how it works is this. Our device is going to try to communicate on a specific SSID, which is your wireless network name, with a password, and then using a specific network mode. For example, the wireless router or wireless access point might be supporting 802.11a, b, g, n, ac, or ad wireless LAN standards. Your device has to agree to use that standard in order to communicate with said wireless router or wireless access point. Now, some wireless routers and access points can support multiple standards at the same time, and that's known as mixed mode. Besides agreeing on the mode to use, your wireless end device also has to agree on the security. And that could be your WEP, WPA2, WPA, along with the encryption standards of Tcp or AES. When you have agreed on using the correct one with the access point, hey, those are agreeing on parameters. And lastly, we have radio frequencies, which are our wireless channel settings. We need to make sure that we have an appropriate channel set with our wireless router and wireless access point, and our wireless clients will connect on that. When all that has been done, then we can successfully say we've associated with a wireless access point. Now, when we talk about associating with wireless access point, it's usually very easy. You go on your wireless client, you'll click refresh to see the wireless networks nearby, and you'll hear about them. You'll hear about the name of them, which will be the SSID. You'll hear about the standard supported, which will be the 802.11 standard used. And also you hear about the security settings in place that access point or wireless router requires. All of that's being provided via a beacon. The default standard easy access wireless mode is known as passive. In passive mode, wireless routers and access points are on time intervals and sending out beacons, and the beacons includes all that information. But there's another mode, and it's called active. And in active mode, our wireless client, well, there's an issue here. The wireless client isn't going to hear a beacon being sent by default by an access point. And what needs to happen in order for a wireless client to successfully access the wireless network is we have to manually configure the SSID and the supported standards on the wireless client. And when the wireless client has the wireless network name on it, which is the SSID, and it has the correct standards to use configured on it, only then are we able to gain access to that wireless router or wireless access point. So the easy way, that's passive, that's the default. The more difficult way of connecting to network would be using the active mode. So take your time, read through the material for wireless LAN operation, and enjoy picking up some awesome wireless skills.
Okay. All right, good. And we'll cover some of those things. I talked about ad hoc, used to connect clients in a peer-to-peer infrastructure, used to connect clients to the network using an access point. And then there's tethering. Tethering is actually an old term that's been around since back in the day when you used to be able to connect a phone to a computer physically and then tether from that. And that used to be the bomb because you didn't have to pay data rates for that kind of connection, as long as you didn't go past your phone's data rate. Now it's a little bit different. You talked about basic service set. This is where each individual wireless network is just that, individual. In my home, I used to have 3 routers that were all on separate networks that were all distributed through the house. And we'd go from one room to another, and it would actually have my laptop would have to switch from one network to the other, and it didn't always do it seamlessly. We have extended service sets. That's more like what I have now with my Asus AX1000. I think that's what it is. Oh, no, it's 11,000. It is a mesh network, and I have 3 of the same, and it allows me to move from one room or one BSA into another BSA, and it's the same network because it's one big mesh, or the proper term in Cisco would be extended service set. He went over each one of the frame, the separate parts of the header in a wireless Ethernet frame, and hopefully you pick that up. Otherwise, you'll pick it up in the reading, I should say. And we've seen CSM, carrier sense multiple access carrier detect, collision avoidance, collision avoidance. CSMA CA, we've seen that before, and you want to know each of the different steps. He explained them. You should be familiar with it. He covered the difference between all right, let me just read it. For wireless devices to communicate over a network, they must first associate with the AP or wireless router. Wireless devices can complete the process in 3-stage process. Discover a wireless process, a wireless AP. This AP is just broadcasting, and the wireless client just authenticates with the AP and then is associated with it. There's several different settings that have to be set, or terms that you have to understand. The SSID, that's the name of the network. It can be broadcast or not. We saw that when he showed us wireless. A password to authenticate. The network mode, 802.11, is the wireless mode we're talking about here. Security, there's several different security. And channel settings, the frequency that we can use. And I think we talk about channels in a couple slides, so I won't get too far ahead. He explained the difference between passive and active. Passive is when you're broadcasting a beacon, And that's when you flip over your wireless and you can see all of the SSIDs for all of the networks in your area at home. There's probably 6 or 7 near me. And they're all hopefully all secure. Otherwise, I could use the wireless from my neighbor. My daughter did that for years in her apartment. Her neighbor didn't have a password, and she just climbed on his wirelessly rode his signal for years until he moved away. And the next tenant that moved into that apartment did not freely allow for the free Wi-Fi for her, so she had to find something else. Active mode, that is where you have to actually know the SSID because it's hidden. It's somewhat a form of security, but there's tools out there to find the SSID of active mode APs, so it's not a very good security system. Catwack, we have a video for that. Let me pull it over. It's 12.4.1.
Let's discuss Catwack, control and provisioning of wireless access points. Catwack is an IEEE standard protocol that enables a wireless LAN controller to manage multiple access points and wireless local area networks. Catwack is responsible for the encapsulation and the forwarding of wireless LAN client traffic between an access point and a wireless LAN controller. Catwack is going to establish tunnels on the UDP ports 5246 and 5247. This is with IPv4 and with IPv6. Catwack will also provide additional security with DTLS encryption, which is Datagram Transport Layer Security. A key component of Catwack is the concept of split media access control. With this, we're going to have the functions normally performed by an individual access point distributed across 2 functional components. The first functional component being the access point map function. That's going to be handling the beacons and probe responses, packet acknowledgements and retransmissions, frame queuing and packet prioritization, and MAC layer data encryption and decryption. The wireless LAN controller function is going to be authentication, association and reassociation of roaming clients, frame translation to other protocols, and the termination of 802.11 wireless traffic on a wired interface. Next is DTLS encryption, the Datagram Transport Layer Security Encryption. DTLS is a protocol that provides security between the access point and the wireless LAN controller. This allows them to communicate using encryption, and it prevents eavesdropping or tampering from those man-in-the-middle attacks. Now, DTLS is enabled by default to secure the control channel for Catwack. This is disabled by default, however, for the data channel. What that means is all Catwack management and control traffic exchanged between the access point and the wireless LAN controller is encrypted, and it's secured by default. However, data from the clients moving between an access point and the wireless LAN controller is not encrypted by default. Catwack data encryption is optional, and it would be enabled per access point. It requires a DTLS license to be installed on the wireless LAN controller prior to being enabled on an access point. FlexConnect is a powerful wireless solution for branch offices and remote office deployments. This is going to allow you to configure and control access points in a branch office, which could be a remote office, controlling it from the corporate office through a WAN link, a wide area network. And you can do this without deploying a wireless LAN controller in the office with the access points. Now, there's 2 modes of operation for the FlexConnect AP, which would be the access point in the branch office. The first one is connected mode. In a connected mode, the wireless LAN controller is reachable. It's reachable across the wide area network. And with this, there is Catwack connectivity where we can send traffic through the Catwack tunnel, and the wireless LAN controller performs all the Catwack functions like we discussed earlier with split MAC. In standalone mode, the wireless LAN controller is unreachable. The FlexConnect access point has lost or failed to establish the Catwack tunnel with the wireless LAN controller. In this mode, that FlexConnect access point can assume some of the wireless LAN controller functions, such as switching client data traffic locally in the network and performing client authentication.
All right, Catwack. I think you did a pretty good job explaining it. Let's see what we've got. Remember, this is for multiple APs, multiple access points, and we are talking about the security, encapsulation, and operation over both IPv4 and IPv6. The Catwack split MAC concepts, he went through each one of these. Pretty easy to remember which one. If you look at all of these options here on the MAC functions, they all deal with frame, packet, and MAC layer information, beacons and probe responses, where the wireless LAN controller MAC functions deal with more association and authentication, translation, termination. So you should be able to separate out these pretty easily. And then he explained nicely about how CapWAP control is enabled encryption and CapWAP data is not by default, and a license has to actually be purchased for the CapWAP for data to be encrypted. And Flex Connect, you can either, if you are in connected mode, from home you can configure, you can access and configure your functions. And if you're not, you still have standalone mode where the local AP, the Flex Connect AP, can assume some of the wireless LAN controller functions, such as switching client data locally. So basically, what this does is, if you were to lose your connection, your network could still operate wirelessly. Your wireless network could still operate, but it wouldn't be connected to the branch office until you reestablish that connection, and then you're back in connected mode. It doesn't mean that it would stop the traffic. It just stops you from accessing it remotely and configuring it. That is standalone mode. Channel management. This talks about frequency channel saturation, and we should jump right to this slide, because this really explains how even though we have multiple channels, each allocated 22 megahertz in the 2.4 gigahertz band, the best practice, and they overlap. So if you wanted 3 unoverlapped signals, those would be 1, 6, and 11. If you use 1, 6, and 11, then your wireless signal does not overlap. Overlapped frequencies provide congestion, so you want to, if possible, create a network allocation, and I'll show it to you in a couple slides, in which you have non-overlapping channels. Now you can do the same thing in the 5 gigahertz standard. This picture is much harder to understand, but 36, 48, and 60, 36, 48, and 60, in reverse there, do not overlap. You can see the signal, and the signal ends here. So 36 ends here. There's no overlap with 48. There's no overlap with 60. Again, you can do the same thing in the 5 gigahertz. And when I'm talking about a deployment, this is an example of a deployment. Note that even if we just use A, B, C, D, so we have A, B, let's just use the real numbers, 1, 6, and 11. So this could be 1, 6, 11, and then 1 again. And then these two don't overlap. So you would have unique unoverlapped transmission of your network. So if possible, this is what you're aiming for. Wireless LAN threats. We have a video on wireless LAN threats. It is 12.6.4.
As we dive into wireless local area networks, we need to describe the threats for our wireless LANs. And to get started, a wireless LAN is pretty much open to anyone within range of an access point. And if they have the appropriate credentials to associate with that access point, they are on the network. Now, these attacks, they can be generated by outsiders, disgruntled employees, even unintentionally by employees inside of your company. And they don't even have to physically enter the workplace to gain access to the wireless local area network. There's many different types of wireless attacks that can happen, one of them being interception of data. Your wireless data, it should be encrypted at all times to prevent it from being read by eavesdroppers, people who shouldn't have access to that data. Wireless intruders are unauthorized users that are attempting to access network resources. And you know what? They can be deterred by using authentication. Denial of service attackers are a little more difficult. They try to access your wireless local area network services and compromise them either accidentally or on purpose. We also have our rogue APs, which are unauthorized access points that are installed by either a well-intentioned user, someone just wanted to have an extra wireless network close by, or installed for malicious purposes, and they want to be able to intercept people's traffic. Using management software, we should be able to detect those rogue access points. How do denial of service attacks happen on wireless? Well, they can happen because of things like improperly configured devices. Configuration errors can disable a wireless network. For instance, an administrator, they could accidentally disable the network with a disable button. Or even an intruder with administrative privileges could intentionally disable the wireless local area network. Now, another DOS attack is where a malicious user intentionally interferes with the wireless communication. What that means is a malicious user has a goal, and their goal is to overwhelm the wireless access point to such a point where no legitimate devices can access it. There's tools for mobile devices for this, as well as specific radio frequency blocking tools. Accidental interference, we all know it can happen. Our wireless local area networks, they're prone to interference from other wireless devices. And these devices can be things like microwave ovens, baby monitors, cordless phones, and even more. The 2.4 gigahertz radio frequency, that is the most prone wireless band for interference. So how do we minimize this risk to denial of service? Well, we're going to harden our devices and keep our passwords secure. We're going to use backups in order to come back online as fast as possible. And also, any changes that we're rolling out on our network, they should always be done off hours, not during a production environment timeframe. A lot of this interference that can happen, as mentioned, is on the 2.4 gigahertz band. So let's move our devices to the 5 gigahertz band if it's possible. Rogue access points are the detriment of wired network security. A rogue access point is an access point or wireless router that has been connected to a corporate network without the explicit authorization of the company. This is completely against company policy. Anyone with access to the physical premises can install a very inexpensive wireless router or access point and allow themselves access to the secure wired network resource. Once connected, these rogue APs can be used by an attacker to capture MAC addresses, to capture data packets, and even to gain access to wired network resources. They can be used to launch man-in-the-middle attacks as well. To prevent the installation of these rogue access points, organizations have to configure wireless LAN controllers with rogue AP policies, as well as they should use monitoring software to actively monitor the radio spectrum for unauthorized access points. With a man-in-the-middle attack, a hacker is going to position themselves between two legitimate entities in order to either read or modify the data that passes between those two entities. Now, there's many ways that a man-in-the-middle attack can be created. A popular way is to use the evil twin access point attack. And this is where an attacker is going to introduce a rogue access point They're going to configure the rogue access point with the same wireless SSID as a legitimate real access point nearby. Locations offering free Wi-Fi, such as some coffee shops and airports and restaurants, they're popular spots for this type of attack to occur because they usually have open authentication. With open authentication, a password is not needed when you're going to access the wireless network. Now, connecting wireless networks would see two access points offering wireless access. The people near the rogue access point would find the stronger signal and probably connect with it. Once that user traffic is sent through the rogue access point, that data is captured and then is usually forwarded to the legitimate access point. The traffic returning back from that legitimate access point will then be sent backwards to the rogue access point. It's going to be captured by the malicious user and forwarded out to that poor, unsuspecting user. This allows the attackers to steal user passwords, to grab personal info, and to even gain access to the user's device. Defeating these man-in-the-middle attacks depends on the sophistication of your wireless local area network infrastructure and also the vigilance that you use to monitor activity on those wireless local area networks. It all starts with identifying legitimate devices on the network. And after you have legitimate devices being known, the network can be monitored for anything that looks abnormal.
Okay. And he did a good job of explaining
As we
each
dive
of
into
those.
wireless local area networks,
So I am going to sort of flip through those slides. I'll let you go review those slides, that more information about that when you get into the chapter material to be able to review that material a little bit more in depth. But he basically covered inception of data, wireless intruders, denial of service attacks, and rogue APs. And he did it pretty in depth for each one. So I am going to allow his video to cover the material. Secure wireless LANs, and we have a video about how to do that. It is 1271.
wireless signals can travel through windows, walls, ceilings, and floors of your office building or of your home. Without using stringent security measures, a wireless network can be as open as a wired network jack on the outside of your building. So let's talk about some of the ways that we can secure our wireless local area networks. Two of the options that are from the early 802.11 wireless phase would be using SSID cloaking as well as MAC address filtering. Some wireless access points and wireless routers allow you to disable the SSID beacon frame, which means if a wireless client does happen to make its way close enough to your wireless signal, they still have to manually configure the SSID in order to connect to the network. Even though a wireless client receives a strong enough signal and may know the SSID of the wireless network, they can still be manually permitted or blocked from accessing the wireless network because of their MAC address. A wireless administrator can specifically permit or deny a wireless client from accessing the wireless network by using a list of approved or denied physical MAC addresses. Although SSID cloaking and MAC address filtering will stop most of those wireless clients that shouldn't be able to join your network, they won't stop all of them. Our crafty intruders can still easily discover the SSIDs of your access points, even if your access point is set to not broadcast it. And also MAC address filtering, crafty intruders can spoof their MAC address and still gain access to the wireless network. So the best way to actually secure a wireless network is to use authentication and encryption systems. We have two types of authentication that were introduced with the 802.11 standard. We have open system authentication and shared key. With open system authentication, this is perfect when you want to have free internet access in a cafe or a hotel or even a remote area. With open authentication, a wireless client can easily connect to the wireless network without having to use a password. With shared key authentication, we have a mechanism such as WEP, WPA, WPA2, and WPA3 to authenticate and also encrypt data between the wireless client and the access point. The concern here is that the password must be pre-shared between both parties to connect to the network. Within the shared keyed authentication methods category, we've got 4 different techniques available. We have WEP, Wired Equivalent Privacy. Sounds great, but this is one of the original 802.11 specifications, and this was designed to secure wireless data using a static key. What that means? It's not very secure, and WEP is no longer recommended and should never be used. The next one is WPA, which is Wi-Fi Protected Access. And Wi-Fi Protected Access was based off of the original WEP standard. It secures data using a stronger Tcp encryption algorithm, but still is not the best way to go. WPA2 is the current industry standard for securing our wireless networks. This uses AES encryption, Advanced Encryption Standard. It is currently considered the strongest encryption protocol. Last, we've got our WPA3, which is our latest and greatest security method. It disallows outdated legacy protocols and uses PMF frames, Protected Management Frames. Devices with WPA3, they're usually not readily available at this time in the market. Along with our authentication, we have encryption. And encryption is the method of us being able to protect our data. Even if an intruder has captured encrypted data, they still would not be able to decipher it in a reasonable amount of time. WPA and WPA2 standards use the following 2 encryption protocols. We have TCIP and we have AES. TCIP is used by WPA, and it provides support for legacy wireless local area network equipment. Now, TCIP addressed the original flaws of WEP, wired equivalency, but TCIP still is not as strong as AES. AES is the encryption method used by WPA2. It's the preferred method because it's a far stronger method of encryption. Now, when data is encrypted, people would have to literally capture that data and break through the encryption in order to get to the original data. So what should we use deploying a house wireless LAN? Well, first off, we're going to go with WPA2 authentication. We want the strongest authentication, which is WPA2 using AES encryption. However, we have 2 choices for WPA2 authentication. We have personal and we have enterprise. With personal, this is intended to authenticate devices using a pre-shared key. Our wireless clients, whether they be tablets or smartphones or Blu-ray players or TVs, will use the exact same wireless password as any other client in the house. There's no special server needed to deploy WPA2 personal. With WPA2 Enterprise, however, this is where you have a radius server, a remote authentication dial-in user service. This server is going to be a little more complicated to set up, but it does provide you a great amount of security. On this server, you will have multiple users configured, and these users will have a username and password combination. This radius server would be consulted by any wireless infrastructure device that a user tries to connect to. If a person on their laptop tries to connect to the wireless access point or router would consult the radius server to make sure those credentials were correct. WPA2 Enterprise was designed for enterprise business environment, but it still can be performed in a house. So how crazy can it get? Well, deploying the radius setup is not too crazy. It's just getting some of the basics down. When you do authentication in the enterprise and you have a radius server, we have to make sure that our wireless access point or wireless router can reach the radius server. And that means our wireless access point or wireless router has to know the IP address of the radius server. Also, because radius is running on the server itself, our wireless access point or router has to be able to target the port numbers that the service is reachable on that radius server. The common port numbers are 1812 for radius authentication and 1813 for radius accounting. But these can also operate using ports 1645 and 1646. On top of that, we want to make sure that we actually have a legitimate device asking if username and passwords are correct against the server. And to do that, we have the shared key. The wireless router or access point will have a shared key configured on it, which will be the same key configured on the radius server. As requests from our wireless router access point hit that server to ask about user and password accounts, we want to make sure that we actually have those legitimate sources of requests. So regardless of how you deploy a wireless local area network, you've got the basics of how you can keep it secure.
Why wouldn't you connect? Don't you know this is the server room? Wireless signals can travel.
He covered SSID cloaking and MAC address filtering and did a nice job talking about the different standards, whether we're talking about WEP, WPA, WPA2, WPA3. And I'm not going to read through all of those. I encourage you to review the content inside of our NetAcad class, or if you're out on the web, the content for all of this material is all available on itexamanswers.net and several other websites as well. But this is one website that you can see all the content, all of the videos, all of the animation, find all of the packet tracers, and of course all the answers for the test. But don't use those in our classroom. But it'll help you to answer a bunch of questions and then and check your answers before you take an exam. Okay. And they talked about the difference between personal and enterprise security. And we talked about TKIP. He talked about TKIP and AES for encryption methods and how to go about setting up. He barely touched on this, but how to set up a radius server for authentication and authorization and accounting purposes. And he explained that. Now, that is it for today's presentation. And he's mentioned WPA3 is the standard that is currently being used when we're talking about encryption, and you'll read more about that inside of our classroom. So that's it for today's presentation on Module 12. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. A lot of interesting information. Those concepts, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of testable material there for the CCNA exam. So please make sure you go through Module 12, the content, taking notes in your tech notebook and your practice exam, and for practice exams. I'm going to cover Module 13 here in a minute, and we're going to actually enable and configure some equipment. My name is Don LaFon, Professor Don. Please ask your questions now. If you're with me live, I'll give you a moment. Ask your questions in our help discussion forums if you're in my NetAcad classroom, and ask your questions down below if you're using YouTube in the comments section. Please also like and subscribe. That definitely helps me. I will see you again in a week or so. Have yourself a great week of learning, and I'll see you in Module 13 in just a moment.